Today, I'm going to talk about finding and adding new people and records to your family tree. I'll use an example from my own tree. To set the stage, I participated in a DNA workshop a couple of weeks ago. For this workshop, I had to start with a goal or research question, find a best known match, and then find a best mystery match in order to help me solve the research problem. So who's missing from my tree? As you can see in my fan chart representation of my family tree, I have information about everyone down to my third great-grandparents, except for the parents of John Bartle and Mary Ann Thorpe. Thus, the obvious research question would then be, who are the parents of either John Bartle or Mary Ann Thorpe? Well, where do I start? Diane Southard is one of the pioneers of genetic genealogy. She has produced many videos on using DNA for genealogy research. She has published books, and this includes a plan that she has developed over the years. In the workshop, we started with finding a best known match, sometimes abbreviated BKM. Well, what is that? It is the closest DNA match you can confidently place in your family tree, whose relationship to you is already proven through traditional genealogy. This person becomes the anchor for your analysis, someone whose position in your tree is certain, whose shared DNA with you is known, and who helps you orient and interpret other matches. A best known match is not necessarily your closest match overall. It's the closest match on the line you're investigating, whose genealogy is well documented and reliable. For a best known match, the ideal solution is a cousin who you already know, who shares DNA with you and descends from the same ancestral line you're researching. In my case, I don't know any cousins on my matrilineal line. Thus, I had to find someone I could verify. That meant searching through my DNA matches until I found a person with a public tree who clearly shared an ancestor on the same line I'm investigating. Once I confirmed the genealogy and the DNA were aligned, that match became my best known match, the anchor I could use to interpret all the other matches in the cluster. Now, I could not find anyone who fit the bill in Ancestry, and I searched down to very distant cousins, down to 20 centimorgans, so I decided to look at my heritage. And there, right off the bat, I found a first cousin I never knew existed. This is a perfect example of why you sometimes need to test at another company. In my case, the best mystery match is VV, but his public tree is very sparse and it had nothing in the line I'm researching. I contacted him and he told me that his parents were Tony and Joan Burrow. I then did a Google search for the marriage of Valence in England. This quickly brought me to a free website with UK marriage indexes showing his marriage. That gave me a wealth of other records which showed Tony's parents were Rhys Valence, who happens to be my grandfather's favorite brother, and Florence M. Leach, whom I'd never heard of before. Thus, VV became a suitable choice for best mystery match. I was now at the point of adding people to the tree. I then created a marriage event and filled in the date and location. It's always important to give a good solid reason for adding or modifying anything in the world tree on FamilySearch. This gives others who might have an interest in this person a way to verify the accuracy. In this case, I listed the source information in the left red box. I then created a source. The type is a web page URL, and I put that link into the box indicated by the red arrow. Then I added the citation, which describes the source where I found this information. I then gave my reason for attaching this source, which was simply that the information in this source matched the information I had found. Next, I will add the information on Florence's birth, death, and anything else I can find. I continued to add people to the tree until I had all the intervening members of VV's line to our common ancestor pair. This shows our relationship. It required extensive genealogical research to find the records that would verify all of the people involved. We can continue now to the next level of ancestors, but that's for another day. I still haven't answered my original research question, but I have made some exciting discoveries along the way. At this point, I want to ensure that all the information I have added to FamilySearch is also saved on my computer. This is where your computer software comes in. For most software programs, you will have to use copy and paste to transfer the data. Using a split screen will be useful for that, or you could use multiple screens if you have the luxury. However, I'm going to use RootsMagic 11 to do this. This will also illustrate why I really like this software and why I highly recommend it. When you open RootsMagic and load your family tree, it will normally come up with a screen that looks like this. It shows my pedigree chart with me on the left and my ancestors going back to my second great-grandparents. You'll notice near the lower left-hand corner 2 little icons. The one on the right is to synchronize with Ancestry. I'm not going to discuss that today. The circled one with an arrow pointing to it is to synchronize with FamilySearch. When I click on this icon, it opens my default browser to the login page for FamilySearch. Even if you are already logged into FamilySearch on another tab or browser, you'll get a new tab or window with a login page. This is so that RootsMagic can connect to your FamilySearch account. You just enter your username and password and proceed to log in. Once you are logged in, this screen will appear. You may now close the browser tab or window and you will be back in RootsMagic. Normally, RootsMagic will remain logged in until you close it. If it does get logged out, you can repeat the process to log in again. When you go back to RootsMagic, this window should appear. If not, just click on the FamilySearch icon at the lower left corner again. By default, it will have matched and then a number checked. You will now want to import your information, so click on the icon indicated. The top of the VV tree is Florence M. Leach, FamilySearch ID PZZ76GF. We will import from the tree by selecting the FamilySearch person with this ID and entering her number as shown. I'm not interested in the ancestors of Florence at this time, so I only included her parents. That's 1 generation back. And I put 5 generations of descendants just to be sure I capture everyone of interest. You will get a notice when the import is complete. I now go to Pedigree View, as indicated by the red arrow, and search for the real name of VV. Remember, I've anonymized it. You will see that all the people we've added to FamilySearch are now added to the tree in RootsMagic. That is just one of the magic reasons I really like this program. And by preparing this presentation, I learned a lot of new tricks. Now for a bit of fun. While creating a video for my Swedish special interest group on Swedish naming systems, Notebook LM created this video for me. I thought it was a bit of fun, and I hope you will enjoy it.
Ever stop and think about your last name, where it came from? For most of us, right, it's this anchor to our family's past. What if your last name changed every single generation?
Your last name, not the same as your parents. And your kids, their last names are going to be different from yours. But in Iceland, it's just how it is. And it's all thanks to a system called patronymics.
So what in the world is a patronymic? The name literally just means father's name. So let's say a guy's name is Jon. His son's last name becomes Jonsson, literally Jon's son. And his daughter? She becomes Jonsdottir, which means Jon's daughter. It's actually like a living piece of history. It's a perfect window into how everyone in that whole Nordic region used to name their kids. You see the exact same logic at play. Larsen, Larsdottir, Olofsson, Olofsdottir. For hundreds of years, this was just normal. Things started to change. So all the Nordic countries basically came to this huge fork in the road. They had to make a choice about the future of their names. Sweden decided to take the path of change. This didn't happen overnight. It really kicked off in the cities way back in the 1700s. You had craftsmen, merchants. They realized it was just plain useful to have a consistent family name for business. That trend just kept growing through the 1800s. By 1901, it was made into law. Sweden had officially switched over to hereditary surnames. So where did all these new names even come from? A lot of Swedes just made up what are called ornamental names, combining words from nature. Soldiers got these cool, powerful names like Sharp. And of course, a ton of people just froze their patronymic name. Now let's flip over to Iceland. Iceland looked at that exact same fork in the road and deliberately chose to go the other way. They chose the path of tradition. This is the key moment. Just about 20 years after Sweden made surnames mandatory, in 1925, they passed a law that would basically lock in their unique naming tradition for the next 100 years. You have to remember, Iceland was in the middle of this big push for independence from Denmark, so holding on to their unique language and traditions, that became a huge symbol of national pride. And the law was incredibly clear. It flat out banned any Icelander from creating a new hereditary family name. So here we are, two Nordic nations who started out in the same place, now on completely separate tracks. And these two very different decisions ended up creating fascinatingly different societies, each with its own set of pros and cons. I mean, the differences are just so stark when you lay them out like this. In Iceland, names are not hereditary, they are gendered, and they all come from one place, Dad's first name. In Sweden, it's the total opposite. Names are fixed, they're not gendered, and they can come from all over the place. That 1925 law, it wasn't retroactive. So if your family already had a surname before the ban, you were allowed to keep it. And this created this small, separate group of Icelanders who had hereditary names, often the upper class, the elite who had adopted them early on. All of a sudden, having a surname became a kind of status symbol, creating this social tension that, believe it or not, is still a topic of debate in Iceland today. Where Iceland is doing this constant balancing act. On one side, they're fiercely protecting their cultural heritage. On the other, they're dealing with the pressures of a globalized world and, people wanting more individual freedom. So how do they manage all this? Well, they set up the Icelandic Name Committee. Basically, if you're a parent and you want to give your kid a first name that isn't on the official pre-approved list, you have to formally apply. This committee is kind of like the guardian of the whole system, making sure any new names actually work with the very complex rules of Icelandic grammar. And this strict system, it has some pretty wild real-world consequences. Take the famous former mayor of Reykjavik, Jón Gnarr. He wanted his last name to legally be Gnarr, but the committee said no. So what did he do? He went and became a U.S. citizen, legally changed his name over there, and then came back. Now, they did introduce a compromise back in 1996. It's called a millinaf, which basically means middle name. And these things act a lot like surnames. They can be passed down from parent to child, but they officially exist alongside the patronymic name. Our names are so much more than just labels we carry around. They're reflections of our culture's values, of what we as a society choose to remember, and what parts of our identity we choose to highlight. When you boil it all down, it's really just two different philosophies. The Swedish surname, it's like a chain, this permanent link that stretches back through generations of family history. But the Icelandic patronymic, that's more like a snapshot. It's a fresh, direct, and deeply personal connection to the parent who brought you into the world.
So thank you for watching. I hope you found some of it useful or interesting. And I hope to see you again. Have a great day and a great week.